On the old battlefields of Russia and Finland, a new generation is living its history.
Я являюсь членом военно-исторического клуба РКК Санкт-Петербург, и подобные мероприятия мы проводим регулярно.
Teemme tämän talvisodan muistoksi.
November 30th, 1939. 4 Soviet armies with 21 divisions, more than 400,000 soldiers, thousands of tanks, warplanes, and heavy artillery cross Finland's borders. The invasion is almost 3 times larger than the Allied landing at Normandy on D-Day. The Winter War is an intense and bloody conflict, fought in unimaginable extremes of cold. It will change the course of the Second World War, and then be virtually forgotten. An invader with overwhelming military superiority, a defender with little more than the will to resist, and the unintended consequences of war. It is a history ignored by nations at their own peril. Finland is a nation forged from conflict.
It was a total fight because we felt that we are not safe anywhere and our life is at stake and our independence is at stake, and if we lose our independence, we are lost.
It was a struggle that attracted one young American to stake his life on a fight for freedom.
Never give up. Always fight for what is right, and they did.
Helsinki, Finland's capital city, has a population of more than 500,000. 300 years ago, Tsar Peter the Great founded a rival city just across the Gulf of Finland. St. Petersburg became the center of Russian Empire, and in 1917, the heart of a revolution. In 1924, it was renamed Leningrad to honor the first leader of the Soviet Union. Its population of 5 million is larger than the entire population of Finland. In 1939, Finland's border was only 40 kilometers away from Leningrad. Moving that border became a justification for war.
Comrades, soldiers of the Red Army, officers, commissars, and political workers, to fulfill the Soviet government's and our great fatherland's will, I hereby order the troops of Leningrad Military District to march over the frontier, crush the Finnish forces, and once and for all, secure the Soviet Union's northwestern borders and Lenin's city, the cradle of the revolution of the proletariat.
Soviet leader Joseph Stalin was confident of a quick victory. Most of his military agreed.
All we had to do was raise our voice a little bit, and the Finns would obey. If that didn't work, we could fire one shot, and the Finns would put up their hands and surrender. Or so we thought.
American Martha Gellhorn, one of the few international correspondents in Helsinki, witnessed the first bombers.
War started at 9 o'clock promptly. The people of Helsinki stood in the streets and listened to the painful rising and falling and always louder wail of the sirens. For the first time in history, they heard the sounds of bombs falling on their city. This is the modern way of declaring war.
The Red Army advanced quickly on all fronts. Finland's defenses seemed on the verge of collapse.
Their use of mass formations of tanks initially had a shattering effect on the Finns. They had never confronted a tank in training, and suddenly they look up out of their trenches and there's 50 of them rolling towards them with guns blazing.
main thrust of the Russian offensive was through a narrow strip of land between Lake Ladoga and the Gulf of Finland called the Karelian Isthmus. Karelia was the childhood home of 11-year-old Eva Kelpie.
It was on the shore of a small lake, and if I close my eyes, I can imagine summer around it and lilac bushes and the path that led to the place where we used to swim as a child. And in Karelia it was always warm and sunny, and of course we were happy. I used to pray to God. I asked him to prevent the war, and I remember that I carried the fear of war inside my child's heart.
First news of war came over the radio.
We didn't believe it. We thought that, well, it's not coming here, it's not coming to Hiitola. But when we were eating lunch, suddenly we saw planes coming straight towards our house, and Father shouted, "Let's go immediately back to the cellar," and we ran to the cellar, and the bombs dropped on Hiitola.
Eva and her family were among the thousands of Karelians evacuated by the Finnish army. Their homes and barns were burned, food and livestock removed or destroyed to prevent their use by the enemy.
We were very much afraid of being taken to Siberia. Every child knew that Siberia was a threat if we lose the fight, and that was a terrible feeling.
But for Eva, the war truly came home the day her father was called away.
When I woke up that morning, when Father was to leave to the front, I remember that when I opened my eyes, I saw his black bag on the table, and I knew that he was still beside me. That is such a strong memory that I almost feel that I smell his clothes and his nearness. And on the steps, on the kitchen steps, he took me in his arms and said, "Father's girl."
The Soviet invasion was planned as an overwhelming onslaught everywhere at once. President Franklin Roosevelt condemned the attack.
It has invaded a neighbor so infinitesimally small that it could do no conceivable possible harm to the Soviet Union. A small nation that seeks only to live at peace as a democracy, and a liberal, forward-looking democracy at that.
The League of Nations expelled the Soviet Union. But as bombs fell on Finland,